I guess almost the entire year since I've done the live streams. So good to be back. Just going to be rejuvenating our project here, but also quick announcement that the workshop is tomorrow morning. So if you're still interested in going, not too late to sign up. Especially, I wanted to make sure that people that are out of work right now, since there's been a lot of layoffs, that if you just message me for a discount, I can get you in, and likewise for students or anyone else learning programming, feel free to reach out for a discount. You don't have to pay full price if you're in those predicaments. So anyway, with that in mind, the link should come across the bottom of these of the announcements here that you're seeing below. Yeah, maybe I think it's got the Discord joining link here, which should work. I think someone had an issue there with the link. I tested it out and the Discord link still worked for me. There it is. Workshop is tomorrow morning, 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. So for North America, Martin and I are going to be doing that workshop, going over event modeling and event sourcing for 4 hours. So do sign up. Again, that's adaptivegroup.com/ hashtag or hashmark workshops with a capital W. For some reason, anchors on pages are case sensitive where the rest of the URL is not. But anyway, if you do get to the Adaptec site, you can just scroll down or at the top in the menu, click on workshops. It'll take you there as well. So with that in mind, let's revive this project. So last year I was going through making this open, how would you say, open spaces event here. So the idea is that we're writing a system with no real heavy libraries or anything like that. We're using the file system to store our state as events. And basically we can do a quick walkthrough here as to what it works, how it works like. So we have Joe, the organizer. In the event model, we have the swim lanes at the top for the different actors. So the organizer here needs to walk through this little wizard-like interface to name the conference, set dates, etc. And then, of course, we'll have the different other participants, so other users like the participants. So there's a couple of users here, and then Eugene, the sysadmin. That's the reason I put the Eugene, the sysadmin, is to show that you do actually want to have the UI UX explained for backend processes, because some human is going to care about that and look at stuff there. And so I would like to definitely give a human interface to things that are on the back end, because systems are there to serve people, and so just because something's happening on the back end there, you still want to give some humanity to the whole thing to keep the system usable by people. Anyway, so what does this thing do? What's the purpose of this? So the reason I'm doing this with few or no libraries is so that you don't get distracted by having to learn React or something heavy, like event sourcing framework or library or anything else for this. Now, obviously, a little bit of boilerplate code is going to come out of this, but it should be lighter than any other libraries you come across. So that will allow you to concentrate on the actual core concepts as you're learning this. Now, I will go over all of this in the workshop tomorrow as well. So if you want to do that with us, feel free to join. I'm doing this in Draw.io, which has a Visual Studio or Cursor plugin. I'm using Cursor AI, but obviously VS Code, and I think other IDEs have a plugin for Draw.io, which is now Diagrams.net, I believe. I forget what it's called, but I still use Draw.io for the name. And the event model, again, for those that forget, I haven't seen this in a while, or this is the first time you're looking at it. An event model is a description of what the system does. So think of your requirements as being on a schematic, a map, if you will, of everything. So Open Spaces is a type of conference where people suggest topics and people vote on the topics. So it's more of a self-organized type of conference that you see happening in a lot of communities, and a lot of conferences may choose to do this. It's definitely a good way of going about creating an organic conference where people, go over topics that they are interested in. And it's kind of a good non-trivial system to kind of play with, because we're not really doing things also by the book, like how you would do like a regular system, and see just how far we can go with our own approach. So if you zoom out, you can see that the event model has those wireframes for how someone does, accomplishes different goals. And of course, at the top, we label these as workflows, and you can split them up on sub workflows. So for example, over here, we have the Open Spaces setup, which of course you can see that the organizer is obviously interacting with the system to create the open space. Here we have the naming. We might have, I think we're just being a little bit more elaborate than we need for a simple data entry thing here, but this is a learning project, so we just want to see how systems store state and how we can use those raw markers in event sourcing to as events in event sourcing to get state out of the system for displaying things. So again, back to the overview. So we're making an Open Spaces setup here. We're setting the dates. So you can set a date for when you want your conference to occur, and then you have your adding of the rooms. So if you have a venue, you might have some breakout rooms or conference rooms, classrooms, if you're doing this at a university or something. So you can give the room names here, and then add them as you add. I'll talk about the color coding here that I have in a second, but let's just go through the workflows first to see what the system does. Adding time slots, we can add time slots to when each session starts and ends, and at the end we should have a schedule that we can see for the day and all that. So once the interesting part is now, once we set up this this event, we can go ahead and create a conference URL, and this is meant to be in person. So when you create the conference URL, we will end up with a QR code, which can be shown at the conference, and people can scan that with their phone, and that gets them into registering as a participant. Here we have some scenarios that we want people putting in. Conferences doesn't exist if they put in the wrong number. So I'm being explicit in some of these things where I want to show, for example, a URL. And if someone goes to the wrong URL trying to guess what the ID is of the conference, well, then they're just getting a conference that you're looking for doesn't exist, etc. And of course, if they do scan the proper QR code, then off it goes and does its thing here. Sorry, there's a bit of a run-in here of that URL, but that's okay. And yeah, once you get the proper QR code, you're welcome to the Open Spaces. Remember, now we're in the swim lane for the participant. We're not the organizer anymore. And so I can register as a participant. And then I'll say thank you for registering. In this scheme of keeping ourselves sort of logged in and part of the how would you say the part of the conference, and how you know that you're at this particular conference? Well, it's this registration code here that acts kind of like your token, your authentication token, so that you can be you can basically say that yeah, this is me, this is my ID for this conference, and you'll notice that this little token is carried in the URL. Obviously, that's not how most systems work, but we're doing this to be kind of transparent, and this is not how you would do a secure system, but it's a little bit easier to follow for learning purposes, to see that, okay, this is the person that's actually interacting, and this is how we do everything in here to double check that the right person has the is manipulating their registration, not someone else's, and they're not seeing other people's registrations. So the next thing that participants do here, we'll go up here. So we had the close registration, participant registration. So yeah, you can close the registration as an organizer right here. So the set sign up URL is all here. Again, QR code generation and conference ID generation. IDs are generated very easily, but I made this a lot more complex in terms of, hey, let's get an ID from a service, and this is our unique identifier generator. This is sort of mimicking what you would do if you're integrating into an external service to get something done, or something at least long running. In the real world, obviously, we wouldn't be so heavy-handed at just creating an ID, but this is here to demonstrate kind of how you integrate external services to your system. And then the participant registration continues here. You can see it labeled at the top. And of course, we close registration here. And of course, here we can show some failures where someone that's registered doesn't really have an opportunity to register anymore because we already closed the registration. So registration is closed. We show that interaction. And you may be asking, what is all that other stuff down below? We'll get into that. For now, it really looks just like you would expect wireframes for any project specification or design, but it's more than that. So topic suggestions come up here, where we're showing someone entering some topics, and over here that topic list is updated. We can add some more topics, and that list is updated. Of course, we also see that the organizers can also see this this list as more registered, as others are adding subjects and topics. And then I think we left off a little bit on here for voting for topics. We had some ideas of how you then, as an organizer, drag and drop certain things. We also had an idea about how you would do this with a non-JavaScript enabled page, where you would have some radio buttons to kind of click on things to move things into their spots with a regular post get type of regiment. And I think that's where we got to. But honestly, after the schedule is completed, the conference kind of runs itself. We could obviously extend the functionality later for fun to integrate with other services or add extra features in future streams. So, but for now, this is enough of a skeleton of a somewhat usable app that we can continue to play around with and see it working. And I'll show you how it works. It's anything that's green here. These green boxes means it's already completed and running. But what's the bottom part here? This is the event model part, and there's some things that I'm changing right now in terms of how the standard for this event modeling works. But the simplest pattern here is, for example, naming the conference. Instead of updating a table, in this example, we're showing how much more simple event sourcing is. We don't have a database, so we simply store a JSON file that has the name of the conference and the date timestamp that it was done at. And that's about it. And it's pretty simple. If we want to display that information, for example, congratulations, you named your event, well, we need to pull that back out. And so it's pretty easy in this case, where we just look at the last naming, where we'd set name and just regurgitate that up to here. So quite easy, don't need a database for anything like that. But we'll see where this green box here can listen to multiple of these yellow boxes and do some calculations. And this is really where, if you're into functional programming, you'll understand it's kind of the the left fold from functional stuff. That no, if you're on the business side, no need to worry about it. It really doesn't matter how it's implemented, as long as you go through time and see these things happen, then you're happy, then your requirements are met. So anyway, that hopefully is easy to understand. And I'm going to just double check that I am properly streaming here. Because sometimes I'm just talking into nothing. Oh, I got the wrong I got the wrong thumbnail here, but that's okay. It's not a podcast episode. So pardon the thumbnail for those that are clicking on YouTube. I should have updated it before clicking start stream. So I'll keep that as a little monitor here as to what's happening. But yeah, so what is the rest of this down here? Well, as you can see, this is the information flow. So it's more complete than just a wireframe, because what we do is we trace information through the system, and that allows us to also understand how complex certain things are. For example, some scenarios can be elaborated below. Naming may not be as simple as that. What happens if you try to rename the conference and, for example, you didn't change the name. So we don't allow changing a name, but you put in the same name. That's no reason to store another event. So when we try to set the name, we give an error. And so, yeah, you might say to yourself, that's great that these wireframes and the storyline is wonderful, but hey, programs have branching. You can if then else things happen in there where you branch off to do different things. Well, event sourcing is kind of from a perspective of showing something by example, and I don't have to show you a list of possibilities. If I'm going to teach you how a system works, I need to show you the normal path through the system for you to really understand, and usually with examples. So if we sat down to kind of in a session for me to explain to you how some website works, maybe I'm explaining to you how Ticketmaster works or some other online service, and you didn't know about it, we would sit down together and I would use it and you would see what I'm doing and understand what the system does. And that's exactly the spirit in which event models are done, because that is what facilitates the best communication. Humans remember stories and seeing someone do something and then copying them. So instead of having some complex diagrams that have flowcharts and all of that, we want to stick to what wireframes already do. And that's this nice story as to what happens. Now, when there are exceptions and people do put in some other pieces of information in some of these boxes that may or may not work, you want to explain to them, for example, that in these example timelines, for basically hitting this button, set name, what are some of the business rules behind that? What are some of the sort of ways that the system can continue to function properly, even if someone puts some bad stuff in? And we could also put in, a test for a limit of the length of the name, whatever we want. We could elaborate here on these example timelines. And these essentially show that if I have some previous events already stored. By the way, I'm changing the format of this in the next version of event modeling. This is a little bit techy still from this given when then behavioral, behavior-driven design type of way of working. And I think the tech people really wanted the business people to follow what they made in behavior-driven design disciplines, but event sourcing, by the fact that there are timelines, you can express things a little bit easier without this. So what I'll be doing is moving these in line at some point. And there's a convention there too. Here there's a convention which basically says, if there's anything in this, you look at this row by row, and I'll read it backwards a little bit too. So I'm not sure if this is the proper order of them. You might, want to take these, take all these blue ones here and really have them situated on this side, because then it kind of makes sense that, if there's nothing happened before, when I try to set the name, then the name is set. Yeah, happy path. No name yet. I'm naming it, cool. Here, renames are allowed. So if I have EM open spaces and I want to rename it to event modeling space, then I can. And basically means that if I already have this stored and I press the button and change it to this name, then it stores it, and that's the name now. And whoever's looking at the timeline, they know that in this case, the last one wins, right? Well, how do we know that? Well, that's kind of the next one over. So when someone actually sees a congratulations screen, or later on, they see the open spaces name later on, you'll notice that the rule is very simple for this state. It's just look at the last one. And so, yeah, we can renames allowed multiple times. Great, because we certainly could have a rule that says we can't rename the conference more than 5 times for whatever reason. And we have to wait for the conference to end and then do that. But it seems like a silly rule. So anyway, here we're just showing that we've named it twice before, and now we're setting it again. And the interesting thing about this is I could make these 3 timelines just one timeline and make it this one. So this would also say the same thing, because how you read this is that before you get to this row, there's nothing behind it. So we would, oops, moved the wrong thing here. Sorry about that. We can actually turn off those layers, because my progress is a different layer here. So if I hide the progress, those green things will disappear, and I can make them appear again. I'll show you what the other layers are later. So yeah, this would make sense as well. And of course, these labels would have to go further below here. So in this case, we can name the entire timeline and have it make sense bit by bit like this. But this convention allows us to also have everything combined together, which I think is okay. It depends what you're trying to do. Let me just explain by copying this. Let's get rid of the progress. I'm going to copy this and I'll show you. This is the original, what we had here, and what could be a better format later. But first, let's explain this current format and the way it works. So if I take all this and I copy it, why did that one not get selected? Okay, there we go. Control copy. And let's just move down here and paste this here. Maybe we'll paste it here so I can have both on screen. Oh, I think I pasted it into that. Let's undo that. So be careful which layer you have enabled, because it'll paste it into that layer. Okay, paste here. So yeah, so what's the difference between doing things one way versus another? I'm kind of a little space here on the left. Again, this is a limitation of these canvases. Some of them have limits, some of them are infinite. Miro is infinite too, whichever way you want to go. The Draw.io is more of a traditional canvas where we have page sizes and all that. But you don't have to have a membership, or you don't have to have an online account to use this. So this is why I'm using this one. So yeah, what's another way of doing this? So I said we can put things on this side here. That's one version. That'll work. Okay, that'll say things that are the same and might be a little bit more readable, because I'm saying nothing's happened before. We have no rows above. So I'm setting the name, and the name is set. Cool, that's still the happy path. That works. And then renames allowed. So okay, previous row in this timeline, I have already, someone has set something, and then I'm trying to set it to be a different name. Excellent. Then it's still allowed. Renames are allowed. Excellent. And here we have multiple times that we can rename. So we have these previous 2 times, and we can name it yet again to event modeling open spaces, not just space, but open spaces instead. And that's allowed too. What we're not allowed to do is to rename something to the same name. So here in the previous row, we have already set the name to EM open spaces, and here we're trying to name it the same thing. And no, we're not allowed to do that. So simple rule to follow. So okay, I beat that horse to death. Let's let's show what we can do in terms of making this a little bit more concise. What would you do to make this a little more concise? So I can copy this again over and paste it here. And this timeline we can basically squeeze everything into this one timeline because it says the same thing. Now that means we don't need these. Actually, we should be careful because we don't need these, but we do need those labels. We will stick those labels sort of in the middle. They're not really timelines anymore. This is a happy path, the actual timeline. But here, we can move these up a little bit to give ourselves space for naming. And so here we go. This should say the same thing. There we go. And of course I could work on aligning these and all that. And what do I do here? Made some little arrow. I'm not sure what that is, but whatever. That's fine. Yeah, so this, sorry, let's move this in a little bit. So this timeline, so we might have the names of the timelines here, maybe like this. I'm not sure if we want these other ones named here, but we could put the names here on this side. Maybe that reads a little better. Right, maybe align them. Maybe have the timeline name, you know, centered around here. That looks kind of clumsy, but it's okay. And, oh, we didn't copy this one. Why didn't that copy? Okay, so that one's still, oops. Okay, paste here. There we go. Okay, so that says the same thing. Now, the difference here is that we can have each of the tests run here. Now, once you're implementing this, what you're doing, what are you testing in this slice here? We call these vertical things slices, these vertical alignments of what happens with the state, a slice. So what we're really testing is what happens when we hit the set name button in all the different scenarios that can happen in. So we're really focusing on this. And instead of taking up horizontal space to branch out up and down and have arrows going this way and this way, we want to keep this as clean as possible and focus on what should happen, what we would like to happen when people are using our system properly. But for completeness, we do have the different scenarios explained in this format here, right? And of course, this format can be improved in many ways, and you know, make it more concise, where we can have the same thing done here. What this means is that we're testing. You know, how do we test this? Either manually by a QA person or AI these days, I guess, and for or unit tests if you're a developer, or you know, whoever it is that's testing the system. They basically check to see whether the system has stored this event after someone pressed a button and put this information in. And of course, since we're doing the same type of tests here, we notice that they share, the history builds up. Here we have no history, and in this test it adds this particular one. Then we're using it in this one, right? So we can basically have the same timeline and just have the tests running off of this. This has the prerequisites of having this in its path before, like in its ledger before. And likewise, when we're testing this, it has these two events here in its history. And so whatever code we have, however it's implemented, when we try to do this, we end up with this. Now, this is very trivial again, so I'm just showing you the mechanics of the format. The only beef with this is that it comes from a given when then testing kind of acumen, which is more technical than what we want our clients and business people to kind of use or have to get used to. So it's great that our technical friends understand this format, but wouldn't there be an easier timeline? And I think if we just call it a timeline And let's copy this one here, and let's see how we could make it even more friendly for people to, just explain this to your mom or your, your son or daughter if they're in school. What would be easier for them to understand? Well, I think we could. Let's just work on this one timeline here, the top one first, as an example. So first of all, we'll need a little more room because we're going to make it a true timeline with no sides to it. And so let's do that this way. And how do we start off? Well, we start off with spacing things out so we know what happens bit by bit. And so we start with setting a name, and the result is this name is set. And then we add another thing we're going to test for. This time we're going to be looking for renames are allowed. Okay, so we already have something in our ledger, in our timeline. Think of it as accounting. We have a previous transaction in our bank account that's there already, and we try to withdraw some money, and we have enough money to cover that. So we get this nice result here. And again, we're not taking out money, we're just changing a name. Well, same type of thing. You can almost think about this as accounting for information systems. We just keep everything that's been around. Yes, the information can grow, but we'll have ways of dealing with that. And so here's the last one. Renames are allowed multiple times. Okay, so we have 1, 2 naming events already, and this one's testing whether the third one works, confirming that many times we can change the name. It's okay, it'll work. Okay, so we have that, and I think this timeline can sort of be indented here because all of this is considered to be a happy path. We could add, to be more complete, name the actual scenario. We just call these timeline markers, and really what they are is they're describing the test case that's coming up next, or at least putting something more information. It's actually quite good for AI to have more context. We'll notice how good this is for modern systems that use AI, because what you're building here is context. You're not just giving it a snapshot of how your system looks, like what data's in the system with a snapshot and some arbitrary rules written in, some sort of rules language or traditional requirements. You're actually showing the AI or others or humans really what happens by example, and it's hard to argue with that. Sometimes requirements can be bad or good because of the way people write them. In this case, you can't really argue that this is the information that gets stored at each point here, and the only way you're going to make this system work is if how you implement it actually ends up with these results and the same outcomes. So here what we could say is first, now we don't need timeline, so we already have the timeline labeled here, and that goes for this as well, right? So we can say rule, right? We can say rule. People know that these systems have to be playing by the rules, right? So we go rule. I'm talking a little bit quietly here because I know that if anyone's watched our podcast, I recently got a puppy and she's sleeping in the other room. So those that have had dogs, and especially as puppies, it's nice to get some quiet time while they sleep. They need a lot of attention, just like human babies. So anyway, so hopefully that kind of makes sense so far, that this is still kind of clumsy, but it's starting to look a little better because we can say rule any name will work as first time setting name. Now, that's a pretty stupid rule because I think I want to throw out things like blanks. Like if someone just hits enter and doesn't put anything in there, we don't want that. But again, I'm just I mean, I could have some client side thing to kind of as a safety net for people accidentally hitting submit, right? But if someone truly wants to be, you know, not a good actor and disable their JavaScript and just send the request with a blank name, sure, you broke your own system. You know, that's the kind of rules we're doing here. And it's really, my point here is that you can do whatever you want, right, in terms of these rules. And so these are no longer timeline names. Remember, we consolidated these separate timelines into one timeline. So these labels start to become slightly different. And this is really, there's no way that this is going to change the implementation at all. This is just helping the readability, right? So we have this now. We have the happy path here. And yeah, we have that. And of course we can now transform this one here, add it to, you know, a continuation, a timeline. But in this case, give it a little more room. And we have a name in the history already. And then we try to set the name to be the same thing. And then we get an error if we do that. That also flows. But notice the difference now, that this format, while it's okay, and for a technical person, they know they have to read row by row, and that, you know, this is what happens, and you're checking if the result is this. Kind of backwards, right? Kind of improved it here so that, you know, you're doing the action checking if the outcome is that. Here's your previous state, previous entry in the timeline. When you get to this part of the timeline, this row, you do this and you check if it has that result. Kind of nice to compare things side by side, that you're storing this. That's not going to be the case all the time. A lot of these things have extra data that just allows extra validation to happen, but what it stores may be quite a lot less. So this is, I think, a little bit more readable, and it's really what we're moving to for the new standards. So instead of, did I also highlight something else? I think I did. Control Z that. Yes, I had that guy highlighted here. Okay, oops, and I'm highlighting even more. All right, let's move this up here. And so this is our difference between, and you know, I think we can get rid of these intermediate ones. Kind of showed you my thinking about how we specify stuff. Okay, and oops, let's zoom out here. See where we are. Oops. Draw.io sometimes does weird stuff. Okay, so now we can replace this. Let's drag it down here out of the way and move instead this one. Okay, so now we have an idea of, you know, I'll keep this for posterity. If someone wants to see the old format, I'll just keep it down here. But this has a much more human readable timeline. Things are just happening bit by bit. So sequentially, there's no need to figure out why is this on the left, why is this on the right. I think this makes it a little bit more explicit. Now, so we saw the name, and then of course, how do we show this name popping up here on the congratulations, you named your event page? Well, this is this green box, which is a projection, a state view, or whatever, many names for this. It's really about making sense of all of the things that happen in your system if you have these yellow things that get stored on the timeline. In this case, it's, again, I said, it's quite an easy business rule here. Just read the last one, ignore the previous ones. So sometimes we have simple use cases like that. And so in here, we don't have a label, but we can basically call it a happy path as well. So we'll paste that here. And just like with this, we want to show, you know, well, how many different ways can this dynamically change, you know? And obviously we can copy a lot from this one here and just show, you know, hey, what happens when we don't, you know, when this congratulations screen, someone knows the URL of this, or they end up on this URL for the congratulations screen, and then it hasn't been named yet. What do we do? right? So we can have an error no name set, right? So sometimes these green boxes can show something else, or have the UI change. So if there's an error, it might put a red border around it saying you have to go back to the previous page, name your events, name your conference, I should say. Event is confusing in this case. So events could also be substituted by facts. You can call them facts. You know, this is in fact what happened. So again, here, how do we read this? Well, again, row by row. Previous row contained nothing. So, you know, you will have, no name set. So, okay, so now we put in this thing that happened. And okay, so it does that. See how it's kind of clumsy to read? So I think this could also use a cleanup from this. And we definitely could add these rules in here to show what it's doing, but it's kind of redundant. These things go hand in hand sometimes, so it would be over specifying if we, added these names here. I think people know when they get to this this diagram that what things are supposed to happen. So I'm not going to do the before and after, or maybe I will just so you see. We do the same thing, paste here, and of course we make space for everything. I think there should be enough space here. So in fact, we have to move this one here. So, okay, with nothing happening before, we have this message on that screen, okay? And which means no name set. If we do have someone has gone here, click the button on this screen and set the name, then we have this displayed. Again, the green box tells us what we need to show the system about the system state, whatever we want. So we can have different ways of doing things. Notice that we're ignoring the date timestamp, for example, in this case. We don't want to show when it was updated. And that's really up to us what we do. And just like here, if we have nothing, we can show a default value. And it's a great place to show those types of things about your system without messing up this top flow here with arrows and conditionals and all that. So hopefully that makes sense. And I think that this this format again is a little bit better because it follows a timeline, and we can see that this green box that we're using here that provides the information for what we show on the screen. How is it calculated, quote unquote? We can see how it's calculated by seeing this example timeline. And there's no better, in my opinion, there's no better specifications than this because they follow how the human mind works, seeing timelines and stories, and our memory works best with those types of mechanics. Okay, so I'll put that below here. Now, obviously, they're a little bit longer, so I think the rectangles for our progress are going to be updated a little bit, and we can drag those down a little bit further. So let's just see what that looks like. Oh, actually, they did fit, so that's good. And oops, we have this one here. Yes. Okay. So before and then after. So this is the new format where you can really gather what's going on, and more importantly, the new tooling out there for all the AI that's being used everywhere to help you along. Well, this tells things a little bit more easily for either humans or artificial intelligence systems, large language model systems to kind of, well, help me write these things or interpret what's going on here. Well, if you show a human or an AI system a sequence like this, with these elements obviously named correctly, these are green and yellow. But if you tell, even I did obviously in this stream series last year, or a year and a bit ago now, I just took a screenshot of of one of these things. I forget what it was for. Took a screenshot of all this. I think it was one of the other workflows further down the line. And I just pasted it into the chat window, and it knew exactly what to implement. There was no hallucinations, really this is about how, oops, I had that one selected too. Let's just manually move that here. Oops. Now I'm going just to undo too much here, aren't I? Well, why is this guy not? Oh, I see. I think I'm on a different progress event model. Let's get rid of that. Sorry, I don't know why I moved this. I think it was just selected as I was moving everything else. So yeah, that belongs up there. That makes sense again. Okay. So that makes sense. And if we turn the progress back on, yeah, that makes sense. So for us to actually have this running, that's great. And so what does this look like in implementation? This cadence of having just this simple pattern of blue and green boxes for input and output and noting things down makes for a very simple implementation system, right? And this is what we're after, simplicity. Simple patterns repeated over and over. If something's too complex, you stretch it out horizontally. The amount of space, horizontal space that something takes up on this type of diagram is proportional to the complexity involved. So this is where you can get accurate estimates. Instead of having something, let's say this was really complex and this whole set of scenarios ran all the way down, 10 times as long. Well, I don't think anyone would agree to, do all that work for the same amount of pay as something as simple as this, on this side here. And so this is where we get to not just guesstimate, with t-shirt sizes, but we can actually investigate and go in with a plan when we're starting to build these systems of just the size of the complexity that we're dealing with. So let's take a look at this system in action. Again, I said that this was built in a simple way, so for demonstration purposes. And if we take a look at here, oh, it's already running, so just let's stop this for a second. But I'm going to split this into split to the right. Sure. Why not? And let's look at the files so you can see how this works. And I actually don't want to see these shapes here. So that's our diagram. We can always reference it here, but here's the implementation. We have a lot of Bootstrap code here. For example, we store this on the file system here. For that gear that you saw, we notify processors. Well, the most important thing is the Bootstrap here. This is where we iterate over each slice. We call these vertical things slices, right? So this blue box here with its UI and how it stores this and what rules it obeys, and this green one here, calling it these are the anchors for each of the pieces of work. How do we do that? Those things get enumerated over here. So sorry for those non-technical. This is how we implement stuff, and I'm not sure why I'm getting these nasty. Okay, there we go. So yeah, this is kind of how we glue things together. Again, this is going to be a web page, so it's going to be a post and a get for this one to show these pieces of information. So we have an app method that can either be a post or a get. Here's how we split them up. Again, I've added liberally some logging into all this, and I think we're going to, in this week, look at actually adding some color coding to the logging. I'd like to have it a little bit more fun and I would say recognizable. So when you're looking at just a wall of text on a log, since we can use colors in log outputs, just at least locally, I'm sure some tools will ignore them or whatever, but I'd like to have on the terminal, some colors so that, hey, when I'm in the, dealing with the business rules for blue, I want the output on the console log to be, maybe have a blue background on the first few characters or something like that. And when I'm looking at a green box, I want to see how, that being green. And when I'm populating the UI, I might want to see that as just back to white or something, and obviously exceptions that I run into, I want to see those as red. So we can play around with this. This is the point of this, is we can really make a really nice environment for developing applications that you can reuse over and over again. And the reason you can reuse them all over and over again is that once you make some of these general sort of ways that this simple system works, adding more features is just more of the same. You're not going to have to take care of that color coding or anything like that. As you see, the logic for each of these these rectangles here is going to be quite systematic and like predictable. In fact, there's only 3 things that can happen here. We can have a successful button press where we actually succeed in naming the event, and this is the result type is always an event, and we do certain things after that, but we'll get into that. We can also fail. If in this case we had that one case here for naming an event. Sorry, I was on the wrong slice, but naming an event here to the same name should fail, right? So we have an exception, and then we can handle exceptions properly. And then we have the green box, which is the query, right? This is the only, in terms of how our system works, this is the only possible way of moving forward, is either trying to change the state or trying to show the state and manipulate these, and the state is only stored in these events. We can also have an exception. And of course, there's an unknown result type. If for some reason we've screwed up some way, that'll happen. And those processors we'll get into later. These are the automatic things that happen behind the scenes. So not everything is just a screen. Some things are done automatically by the system, right? So yeah, let me see here, 1 second. Okay, Puppy was getting in trouble there for a second. All right, let's see here. So yeah, how I like to think of automation in a system, things that are done automatically for you, is really, it's a robot doing it. It's actually good to think of what that would be if a human was to do it. And then just understand, instead of someone actually hitting a button on a screen, it's some automation hitting a virtual button. And so that's why you'll notice that even though there's no screen here, there is a gear, and it's taking some information that already exists in the system. Of course, the only way to show information in the system is by looking at one of these green boxes. That's the outflow. And then, just like a person hitting a button on a screen, the processor can change the automation, the robot, whatever you want to call it, can change the state of the system by issuing one of these blue boxes, which is the same thing as hitting a button on a screen to submit your form, and similar results. It stores another one of these yellow boxes, and this actually does add a lot of clarity to a lot of stuff. So when you see this processor added here, this is kind of the bit of infrastructure that automates what a screen would do. And there's some interesting ways to, you'll notice that we have the event, the exception, and the query for our screens. But we also have the same thing for automatic processors. I haven't actually finished this one here. We don't have the view because it's not actually necessary. Processors really just look at the blue box. The green box is pretty much the same. So more on that later. But we do have an ability to say that they're almost the same thing. So we can pull out some common code from both of these areas here. And the only real difference is how information gets mapped from basically a web request when you're adding something and submitting a form to something that doesn't have a form and doesn't have all of that web goodness around it, which is just raw processing power. Otherwise, they're really identical. So in one of these streams, my goal is to really combine these two and make it stick out like a sore thumb what the difference is between what a processor does and what a regular screen does. They're quite similar, but obviously with the processor, you're not getting you don't need to deal with the forms and things like that you get from your web framework, your web server logic. So all that infrastructure, like we're using Node Express in this case. Okay, I'm not sure what that. I think I copy pasted something here. Let's see what I changed. Oh, I don't know what I changed in my app.js, but obviously I changed something. That might change up here. Where's my change? Let's look at a good difference. I pressed the button somewhere. Function strip summary. Oh, I would think I was showing something here. Is that back now? Nope. Let's see. Okay, I think it's done. So I backed out of that. Obviously, our code wouldn't work. So let's swap these around. I'm gonna close that one. Yeah, so what is all that bootstrapping code good for? Why do we have that bootstrapping code? Well, it's to make the actual business logic kind of have a nice house for it. So you'll notice that these tests are going to be these timelines, right? That we saw drawn in this fashion here. You'll notice that we have, the same structure just in text as what we have here on a display, and they map very well one-to-one, which is really good. And then how we handle some things, we explicitly show here. So there's some nice signatures here that are familiar to a lot of people from event sourcing and this type of way of working with systems. How we kind of have a left fold way. We say what we're listening to in each of these things. These are event handlers, so how we interpret history in this case. How we refine certain things. Here we have parameters that we can get, obviously, from the web request. All sorts of things. State function, which is something that we can basically have for, do we need to know anything about the history? Some things like canceling an order, maybe something that you always allow. There is no way, you don't even care if the order ID doesn't exist. Those are interesting places where you don't care about the state function. I think in this case, we can set dates as many times as we want, and we just ignore the previous state. That's why this is not used. And the reason this is not just state and event is because the function may not be called. So it's a little bit of an optimization here. Anyway, that's just how we've implemented it. But you'll notice that each of these rectangles, when we implement them, follow the same sort of structure. We have a navigation up here. It tells us if we're going input and output. Actually, this direction doesn't belong at the navigation part because it's really about state change versus state view, and it may not actually be tied to navigation because it may be part of an automation. And here the idea of navigating is kind of not really the same word. You might want to pass something off to another processor or something, but even then, that's something that's not done as explicitly as the next URL for your congratulations screen. But we'll get into those differences. So have a few different ideas about making sure that this direction here gets put somewhere else. And then We have things like initial state if we're worried about calculating things. In this case, we just have our initial state because we're going to be dealing with an array at the end of it all. So we have an empty array, obviously. And here we obviously add things to the data. In this case, we don't really care what it is. We're just adding the raw event data. So hopefully that makes sense to everyone. And then, of course, notice the structure of the slice. It does include the testing, the timelines, right? So testing is quite easy to find a home for that. There's no separate test project and all that. Does this actually affect how the system runs? It doesn't. When we run the system to run the tests, we do node app.js --tests, right? And let me just move this up so you can see what happened here. Where's my, go up here, right? So, we have some output if we want to debug what the tests spat out, and you can interrogate that. But at the end, we have our summary, which I've just added some little emoji things. Use the cake for a slice, so we're testing this slice. Yeah, all the tests pass. So test summary, 0 failures, pass 26. And this whole system is so simple that I didn't need to use a testing library at all. We have our own testing library or function that does everything we need down here, tests. And all it does is iterate through all of the test timelines, finds the tests, and runs it through that gauntlet like I showed you earlier, where it goes through and finds any previous events that it needs to take into account and then test a command, etc. So we make that difference. So the differentiation here is input, right? The direction. And based on if it's input or not, we call the refinement function and put in the parameters and the exception, or just the parameter if we don't have an exception, because we have the green boxes can't really fail. That's the other thing. When you're looking at the state of a system, there's no way that you can reject what's in it already because it's already in it. You just have to have an opinion of what you say about it. And that's a big distinction and what makes these systems way easier to deal with. Of course, we have our summary that we add to and spit out all the results after. But notice that for our testing framework with all the assertions that we need, this is pretty much all that we need in terms of our tests. Right? Here we go. Here's where it actually says, hey, if we have run tests, which we actually did in here, so this test parameter is really what sets this variable here at the top. I can scroll up there and show you. And that's it. Otherwise, we're running this. Notice that we exit the process after we run the tests. So we don't actually get to this part, which would really hang the whole thing because we'd be running the application. So this is kind of like a either one way or the other flag. And we have some helpers here when we run the application. What we have is these, excuse me 1 second here. All right, puppy interruption, but always nice to see the little event modeling mascot, Leela. She's my little puppy wiener dog. So let's see. Okay, hopefully everything's still online here. Yeah. So that's how we. If I run this without tests here, it'll just launch the application. So I also added some helper utilities in Fish Shell. So if I go to scripts, I'll show you what that looks like. Scripts, events fish. So here we have just a simple script which allows us to view, to watch, for example, what events are already in there. So event. So we have abbreviations in Fish Shell again. I love Fish Shell. It's quite a nice shell where you can define your own tab completions very easily. So in this case, I can watch the events come in. So right now there isn't any, but as soon as I make an event happen, it'll show me what it is. And the events really just sit here in the, where is it here? The events folder. Oh, I deleted it. So just to start from fresh, but it'll get created, you'll see, as soon as I name the conference. So let's go into this, and I actually want this to be in here on this side. Oh, I don't want this one. Why did it go here? I want it to be right next to this one. There we go. All right. So as you can see, I'm still working on making sure that this is in the right direction. I think what's happening here is I'm converting the logic to kind of how I showed you before. This by the slice architecture, but I had it in kind of a messy implementation before, where I had the posts and gets like right here. That looks a lot messier than what I showed you in terms of the slice structure, because it's a lot more predictable. You know exactly where to put your event handlers. You know exactly where your refinement function is. And all of these things, whereas this was more ad hoc. So I said, all of these things really follow the same pattern. Let's make a structure for it instead. And so I think the reason that these paths here are getting listed first is because they are getting called explicitly by this direct call here, whereas the bootstrap method is getting called later. So any of the slices that were actually defined earlier on are getting, where is that here? Bootstrap code. Yeah, so there's the for each root, right? It has that there. Actually, sorry, that's not the place. I'm wondering why it actually is getting called there. Router stack. But anyway, for some reason, yeah, those ones are getting called first. I'll have to find out why. It depends when this bootstrap gets called, and whether these are getting put at the bottom or the top. Needless to say, once these last three pieces are rewritten to follow the array of slices that I have, they'll get to the bottom here. And so whatever the slice was defined first will be at the top, and that's kind of what I want, because you can control click that one and assume that's the start, like where you should start debugging your information, your system from the beginning. So here we are. We are on that first slice. And yeah, sometimes I guess it may be oops, let's move that back. Let's move this one here. We can flip back and forth between our screen, our requirements here, where we are on the actual implementation. Now notice these are wireframes The style is much different here. I really want these to be easy to draw, very quickly convey the information that's being captured and displayed instead of worrying about the style. Now, some people do this in Figma where they actually want the style defined here and everyone works off of that. That's actually a really good way of doing it. I don't want people to jump all over the place to go for different pieces of information of what the system's doing, what it's supposed to be doing. And so I like that, but it's a lot easier here to not complicate this with the styling in the UI. And so here's the styled. I mean, it's minimalistic, but let's just say event modeling conf. Okay, and watch, as soon as I hit the continue button to set the name, I should probably have this button called set name. Oh, congratulations! Just like we said, we have this congratulations pop up. Notice all of the things that were that ran. So since this is when we ran it first, and here's all the stuff that that happened. I have names for all these, so this is why I want these color coded, right? So we can see, very quickly by scrolling through this, where are we exactly, and are we dealing with a green box slice or a blue box slice? What's the name? You should be able to really quickly rifle through this output and map this to where you are on here. But if you know what you're doing, this is pretty easy to decipher. Notice what happened here though. I have the first event for naming the conference, right? If I go back and rename it and say event modeling open spaces and do that, notice that there's a second event, and look at that, it is named that. So without a database, we're able to do an update very quickly. All we have to do is pay attention to the last thing that was written. That's the base case for a lot of stuff. So let's continue to the next slice here, which is the setting of dates. Set dates, and we can look at, I don't know, let's do tomorrow since that's our conference. So let's just say it's a one-day event, and we do that. So congratulations. Days is just a range. So obviously we could work on the UX to be a little bit more friendly, but we can see that it's just happening on one day. And notice that set dates is here. Now this little utility is kind of neat. It has three things. I can watch for events. I can also give fake events to quickly fast forward my timeline to some other scenario, which is kind of neat. Having just files for what happened in the history is a very fast way to spin up new scenarios and do all sorts of things. And it's really good also for troubleshooting production systems, because you're just looking at essentially what is a very reliable log of what happened. We're all familiar with the traditional logging that we see on this side, but as you can see, it's got all sorts of information that may or may not be pertinent to whether the system's working well. In this proper event-sourced log, everything is important. This is the way the application actually functions. So huge difference between event sourcing and just logging. People say that it's a great way to replace logging. It's much more than that. So what I wanted to say about this is that we have the name of the event and all that, but there is another option on this which is the all. And in this case, we actually see the full name of the JSON file, right? Notice that it embeds the sequence number in the name. It has a data component, and it also has the name component, which is the type. Because when we're going through all of these files, we really want to be looking at ordering them by name, because the first four characters are the numbers, so we'll get them in the proper order. But that's all we really want to do. We don't really want to inspect the names of the files. We might just, if there's some other junk files in there or helper files or whatever, we might just want to pattern match that it ends in event.json, right? And from there, we can have as data the actual type in here. Which is helpful. because you can keep all the logic the same manipulating the file. But the data portion is what we're looking at here. The name is the name of the event, so such as naming a conference or whatever. And so this is quite useful. As you'll notice, we'll now be able to continue on. And here we can add some rooms. I added some defaults here to call the first room room 1. I mean, you could do computer science room 100, I guess, if you're at a university, and then just add that. Notice that the room added event comes here. Now, if I'm tired of seeing this room added because I know that it's a room added and I don't really want to see the full name, I can go back to watching the events without that switch and just look at the raw data, which is much nicer, right? So notice that it does default to incrementing the room numbers by 100, and this is nothing special. It's not part of this complex part underneath here. It's just some helper JavaScript to make the UI better. You can specify that behavior if you want, and that would be more like just some wireframes that you would use. Unless it's something super complex, you may show state and make another swim lane for these yellow boxes here to say, hey, this is happening on the client side, and be more explicit there. So anyway, I'm hoping that maybe my mic's a little bit loud. Let me just turn it down a bit. How's that? Don't think I'm redlining anymore. Okay. So yeah, defaults to the next name. So we can add some rooms. So we assume that those rooms are added. Notice that that's all we're storing in the system. And we can continue on to the next part. And now we can add time slots. So we can do session 1. I made some defaults that make sense. 8 a.m. to 8:55. Sure, let's add that one. Session 1, session 2. Let's go all the way to adding 4 sessions in the morning. And at noon, we're going to have lunch. Right, so we'll do lunch as a lunch is there, and then of course it picks up anything that's numbered. It'll give you it'll default to that, so it won't give me lunch 2. It'll look at what's been numbered before, and let's just go all the way to yeah, 5 o'clock. I think that's good. That's realistic. Notice how all of these just been added as events, and we can do whatever we want with them, and we can continue. So this allows us to watch what's happening in our system as people are using it. What's really cool is that you can do this on live systems with lots of people participating. Right now we just have the organizer of the event doing that, but it's a lot more animated, obviously, when we have participants as these things are flying through and all that. But the output is pretty simple. I mean, it's pretty easy to extend this this function if you want to play around with it. You know, right now we have where is this here? All, right? Oh, there it is. Switch case all. All events data true. We could certainly have data format and look for all, or maybe put a JSON instead of all. So maybe you don't want any of this other stuff, and maybe you want to embed the number as a JSON property at the top of an object. So you could have a wrapper around that, and that might be easier to funnel through something like JQ, and work with it that way. I don't know. Not that you need to. You can just go to the files directly. But if you want to add some extra JSON JQ-based functionality within this subcommand for watch, or maybe add another different subcommand, you know, to maybe do some of your own projections and, you know, on the fly over this. Totally extendable. I mean, just to do this was quite easy to do, and has some neat stuff. So anyway, this is the next part here that that we're getting to, where we actually hand off the process to the participants at this point, but we need to give them a URL to go to, right? So I don't know if this URL jump will work in here. This is the browser that's within Visual Studio Code. But let's give it a go. So let's create the URL. So This is kind of interesting because a lot of the automation is done with a to-do list. That is one of the most interesting things about event modeling, is that it allows very complex processes to be explained very simply with a to-do list, which is very similar to a shopping list that you go into a grocery store with and check things off as they get done. That same kind of mindset is in play when you're doing these processors, which makes it easy to see if you've already done something, it's crossed off, or it's in the process of being done, and then kicking things off just once, right? No, I have an extra arrow here. Really messed this up, didn't I? Okay, there we go. It's nice and clean. Oops, cleaner anyway. Okay, Draw.io is kind of annoying sometimes. Scrolls off some weird place, depending where you click. So yeah, we have this handoff here. And of course, for the handoff, we said that once the participant has done this conference, I guess there could be a summary for, we could be nicer here when you get to this screen. We could probably have a summary of everything, which would be nice, because if you made a mistake, you can, click back on one of these menu items and pop back to where you made the mistake and fix things up, right? It is supposed to be kind of like a wizard interface here. So anyway, yeah, so we're supposed to get a QR code when we hit create, and that's exactly what we did. But what it did do is it has this to-do list of conference IDs to get, and we say, okay, we need to get one. A value 0 is how we kind of initiate this processor. Like sorry, not a 0, but a blank string in this case, because we're dealing with, I guess, GUIDs. So yeah, oh, look at that. And it did generate that conference ID. The production system is a full long GUID. But another thing that I did here is that I don't want long GUIDs. I think for just demonstration purposes, we're okay with the first 8 characters. That's unique enough for demos, and you don't have to take up huge real estate with a 24-character long GUID or UUID, whatever you call it, GUID in .NET, UUID and everything else, I guess. And yeah, so an interesting way of dealing with that is just to, hey, here's a wrapper function that'll give you shortened ones instead. And yeah, they'll definitely not, very small chance of them, having a collision while you're doing a demo with only 17 events in this case. And really none of them are using a GUID up until now. We're also not using any IDs for the events themselves. They're just sequence numbers, because that's all we need to identify them with. And again, that's just this implementation for demonstration purposes. You can replace that with proper GUIDs, as a lot of people want, or UUIDs, along with a sequence number. So I wanted to go through and just show you where I did that simple little wrapper. I think most of the utility stuff is at the top. Somewhere. Where did I put it? Oh, yeah. There's a padding, long IDs. Oh, right. So includes long IDs. So if I put long IDs, I have to explicitly specify long IDs. If I just run it, it's going to give me short IDs. So if I open that up, I can see where, oh, here. So every time that I have UUID, I have a generate ID that wraps require UUID. And of course, if I have the long IDs, I give the whole thing back. Otherwise, I'm just taking the slice of the first 8 characters. And this little one-liner kind of gives you this nicer ability to have something reasonable to look at, instead of having so much space taken up. And that's another reason why I put the event file name not in the default view, but also gave the option to have all in there. And I think with these 2 combinations, you can really see what's going on quite quickly. Okay, so next part. So we jumped off into this next step here, where we're displaying the QR code. And of course, not only do we get the QR code, but we actually get the request, the URL that the QR code stands for. Here we have localhost, the registration, and your registration. So register at this conference. So the conference ID is here. So if we want multiple conferences, they have different IDs. For this particular simple system, I'm using something that someone will run locally for themselves. So it's really not built for having concurrent conferences, although we could easily add that feature later and have it still behave properly. There's not much that happens after conference is finished, so there's not too many things to consider. And again, I chose this because it's a real thing that people can use at conferences to actually make something like this and not burden it with features they might need. A beautiful thing about event source systems is they're incredibly easy to extend compared to traditional systems. They're modular by nature. These green boxes pop up whenever you want, and they're islands unto themselves. You're never dealing with a giant database schema trying to untangle all the foreign keys and implied coupling that the code does on top of the data. It's really well segregated. So by default, everything that we code is always event source. There's no way that I'm starting any project without event sourcing, because I have this full accountability of what happened. There is no guesses as to why a table has some data versus what I expected. It's very, very easy to see what's going on in the event source system. Very little stuff hiding. So, and yeah, I can't wait till tomorrow. This will be a workshop with Martin from Germany that wrote the Understanding Event Sourcing book. So I'm always happy to do a whole workshop with him. And he's got quite an awesome workshop by now. So he's been doing a lot of stuff over the last 2-3 years with event sourcing and event modeling. And if you're watching the podcast, obviously you know him from there. So let's continue. So let's pretend that we're someone that scanned this QR code. So I can highlight this, and hopefully I can just paste it in there, and this won't die on me. Oh yeah, it definitely did something weird. Why is it doing that? Can I not press Control C on here? I can't even right click. Control copy. Huh. Is that actually... Oh yeah, what is that? Why did it do that? That's not good. Okay. Very strange. Can I copy that? Maybe leave off the characters? Is there some silly encoding here? I think I know what it is. Okay. Because this is an Electron app, everything is encased in everything. This is a real pain in the butt type of wrapper. VS Code, because an Electron app, is actually a whole browser. And so having a browser within a browser has these weird wrappings in here. And I've always had issues with doing things with this. And I don't know if it has a pop-out copy current URL. They added some functionality. Let's see if we can just add another. Let's just do this in a proper browser here. So here we are. Join the conference. Ah, right. Okay, so we just copied that into the real browser here. And I think it'll work better in here. At least maybe I can copy it from here. Just look at what's in our clipboard. Yeah, that copied it correctly instead of all this other garbage, which I think is the entire document object model of VS Code. So I don't know. It's pretty gross. I could just dump these out of my clipboard ring. Yeah, I think that's it. Okay, enough of those. So let's paste it in here. And okay, there it is. So pretty tough to just copy from this silly browser. But okay, good. So now we have a screen that that the participant sees, right? And it says, hey, what's your name? Participant, register. Notice the menu changed and all that other stuff. It's not that visible. Sorry, if I highlight it here, it's more visible. But notice that that conference ID is embedded in there. Again, just to repeat, I'm putting things in the URL so it's easier for people to see where the stuff is hidden, like where stuff is passed along. I don't want things to be hidden in cookies or some other database and all that. I want this to be as explicit as possible for everything involved in running an application this way. So let's say that my name is Adam and I'm going to register. And notice that the registration is done. Now I have a registration ID, and that is linked to this conference ID. So now, obviously, if I run another conference later, it's not going to get confused with me registering for that one, or if I'm not registered for that one, etc. Easy to see how assigning this here. And what events really are, they are the essence of any type of data relationship that you have in a traditional system. But they're not obfuscated by all the other stuff, all other contents in the same row and all that. Anyway, so hopefully that makes sense. And notice that this blinks from sleep back to reading or checking for another line if it's been done. It's such a nice, simple little script to have this watcher. So it says, "Thank you for registering." That's here's that. Here's that, and then we can close the registration if we want. If we go back and use the URL for the organizer, and again, doing the proper security on this to hide these things is pretty trivial. We can do that later, but I think it's fun just to work with a full trust here, just to be able to see things and have fun. So let's continue, and let's do suggest another session. So current sessions, there isn't any. Let's suggest a session. Oops. Oh, that's right. I've actually been working on this part. So we got to the part where I am working on these tokens. So I don't want this old way of working, and I'm jumping into this new way of working, which is kind of where we got to. So I'll leave it at this, I think, for today. We've streamed for a while, but in order for us to kind of explore more of these possibilities, what we can do with this, hopefully we can see you at the next workshop, which is coming up tomorrow at 8 a.m. Pacific Standard Time. That's Vancouver time. So go ahead, head over to adaptecgroup.com. There's a workshop section. Hit the workshop button at the top and join us. Again, if you are out of work or you are a student, I know the times are hard, just message me and get a discount to join the class. Tomorrow it'll be me and Martin, and you also get the Martin's book, hard copy, which is this one here, explaining all of this in great detail. So let me know if you want to join. You also get that book, or just go get the book. I mean, you don't have to join the workshop, but it's really good to be there with me and the author of the book to learn about this stuff from people that swim in this all day, every day anyway. So I hope you learned something. I don't know if the chat was actually working today. Yeah, I just got some spam. And I don't think the chat display was working, so that's good. It seems like Twitch is always full of spam accounts spamming get more viewers. I don't want more viewers. I want quality viewers that actually are interested in this. So I'm not out there trying to get 1,000 likes and 1,000 views. It's more about having this on a recording somewhere that people can refer to back. But I'm looking forward to working on this over the winter. I love this little project because it's quite simple. in terms of the structure. I really like the fact that the entire application is one file, because it's so easy to segregate each of these rectangular boxes that we're looking at. Right, so if we go back to here, each of these rectangular boxes that we have ends up being, these and these little timelines that we have, they're just simply here in text. So wonderful, smooth way of working. So again, for those of you that stuck around, thank you so much. And again, 8 a.m. Tuesday, December 9th is when the conference starts. You can sign up right up to the start time. I don't mind. Just let me know if you need a discount. And hopefully we'll see you there. And I guess I'll get something to eat and get rest up and go to sleep so I can be ready for 8 a.m. I hope you have a wonderful evening, and I'll see you soon again on one of these.